the details of the cooperative agreement, its terms and the purpose, and then wrapping up with a little bit of insight as to how the funding is going to enable SGIP to execute on its mission. And then we'll follow up with questions and answers. So as we go through there, if you have any questions, one of the best ways to do that would just be to type that into the little chat window at the bottom of the GoToMeeting panel that appears on your computer desktop. And you can type in your question there, and then we'll have staff here to gather those together, and then they'll read them back to the panelists at the end. If there are those that are calling in and do not have the GoToMeeting window on their computer, we can try and allow questions that way too. But primarily it will be through the chat window to let us know that there are people with questions out there. So with that, let me introduce the panelists that we have today. And so I introduce myself, and joining me from SGIP is John McDonnell. John has been is the chairman of the board for the SGIP. And also joining us from the National Institute of Standards and Technology is George Arnold, who has been recently promoted to the position of Director of Standards Coordination Office at NIST. And joining him is David Woolman, who is currently the Smart Grid and Cyber Physical Systems Program Office leader of the Smart Grid program at NIST. And so with that, let me have us begin that with the background on this. So George Arnold, if you will proceed.
Thank you very much, Patrick, and good afternoon or good morning, everyone, depending on where you are. And just like to begin by saying that at NIST, we're really delighted to be able to continue and strengthen our partnership with the SGIP through this cooperative agreement. In case some of you aren't familiar with NIST, because you're kind of new to this effort, let me just say that NIST is a non-regulatory agency, a science agency in the U.S. Department of Commerce. We've been around for a while. We were established in 1901, originally with the name National Bureau of Standards. Our mission is to promote U.S. innovation and industrial competitiveness by advancing measurement science, standards, and technology to enhance economic security and improve our quality of life. We conduct a broad scope of R&D activities, measurements and standards, and we are responsible for coordinating the federal government's activities in standards, and we have a long history of collaborating with the private sector in standards development, which, as everyone knows in the U.S., is really led by, predominantly carried out by the private sector. But from time to time, Congress sees the need for the federal government to play a convening type of role. And in 2007, Congress tasked NIST through the Energy Independence and Security Act to coordinate the development of a framework, including protocols and model standards for information management to achieve interoperability of smart grid devices and systems. And in that role, we work very closely with many organizations. We work in close partnership with the Department of Energy, with the regulatory community at the federal and state level, and of course with the private sector, literally hundreds of companies, associations, universities, laboratories that have been participating in this effort. Congress, when it gave us this task in 2007, specifically directed NIST to carry out this work with the cooperation and input from the private sector and other government agencies. And the vehicle that we established to carry out that cooperation and input was the original Smart Grid Interoperability Panel, which we set up in November of 2009 as a public-private consensus-based organization to facilitate, coordinate, collaborate, and accelerate the development of smart grid interoperability standards. At its inception, through the establishment of the current SGIP, the work of the organization, the administration was funded by NIST. However, our long-term plan was to establish this, get it going, and then transition the management of the standards coordination to the more normal model in the U.S. standard system of private sector led and funded activity. So a little over a year ago, we encouraged the SGIP, the original SGIP organization, to begin the planning to transition the organization into a independent nonprofit organization funded primarily by the private sector, but with continuing strong support by the government in both participation as well as we are here to discuss cooperative funding arrangement. The role of the SGIP continues to be really critical in the development of the smart grid, in coordinating the development of requirements, providing the standards that industry needs and the regulatory community looks to ensure the interoperability and secure operation of the smart grid. In addition to the funding aspect, NIST will continue to play a very strong role in the work of the SGIP. We have many technical experts from the NIST staff who participate in the various working groups and committees of the SGIP. We have many NIST staff who work in leadership positions in the various working groups and committees, and that will certainly continue as we move forward. So this sort of gives you a little snapshot of where we've come from 2007, 2009 to today. And at this point, I'd like to hand it off to John McDonald, Chairman of the SGIP Board of Directors, to discuss the SGIP as it exists today. John?
Yeah, thank you, George, and welcome everyone. And it's a great opportunity here for us to go through NIST and the SGIP and the agreement with everyone. I just, George mentioned that the SGIP was established in November of 2009. To fulfill the obligations that NIST had with the role of EISA. But as George said, that was not, meant to be the long-term way that for funding. And so in early 2012, George and NIST really tasked the governing board of the Smart Grid Interoperability Panel at the time to begin thinking about transitioning from the government-funded model to more of a member-funded model. And so a lot of work was done last year. We began in January by setting up a core group of board members we call the Business Sustainment Plan Work Group, led by Scott Unger, to begin thinking about putting a plan together on a very much of a collaborative basis.
And then culminated in July of last year when we formed the nonprofit 501c3 organization called SGIP 2.0 Incorporated. So for 5 months from July through December last year, we were continuing the work of the initial SGIP group, but in addition, starting up really the new organization. So we had board meetings for both organizations for the last 5 months of last year as we continued the work, but also built the new organization. The goal then was to transition from the initial SGIP organization fully to the member-funded organization beginning this year in 2013. So the mission, of the new organization is really provide the framework that's mandated by EISA for coordinating all the smart grid stakeholders in an effort to accelerate standards harmonization and advance the interoperability of smart grid devices and systems, similar very much to the initial organization. And fulfill that mission by facilitating standards development for smart grid interoperability. And, in addition to that is looking at the existing standards that we have, identifying those and leveraging those to the greatest extent that we can. Also, focus on the testing and certification requirements, putting plans and procedures together for that. Third would be making sure that the performance of the activities, continuing the momentum, and a lot of emphasis on a program management office to monitor all the activities, making sure that the resources, the deliverables, the schedule on a month-by-month basis are all being met. And if there is any issue that needs to be resolved, identify that and resolve that as quickly as possible. Also, informing and educating the industry stakeholders on interoperability. It's important that not only that we do the work at SGIP, but that we effectively convey what we're doing to the industry, all the different stakeholder categories, how important standards are with respect to interoperability, and do what we can to inform and educate. And then at least for almost 3 years now, we've emphasized global outreach. And we find that there's countries, a lot of countries that are embarking on putting overall countrywide strategies together for smart grid with a strong technology component internally with universities and with companies within the country. Of course, their own policy and regulatory requirements within the country, but we find in many cases the standards part of that component is missing. There could be a national standards organization, but they're not as familiar, let's say, with the smart grid type of standards that SGIP is. So we've become a requested member, actually, a strong part of the team for countries like Korea, Japan, the European Union, the 27 countries there, for Ecuador, and soon to be Colombia here recently in Latin America, to provide that the standards component of what they're doing with respect to smart grid. On the next slide, we'll talk about the relationship then with NIST. Of course, it was important, voiced very effectively by George and others at NIST, that though we were transitioning to, away from the completely NIST-funded model to the member-funded model, that NIST was still very much committed to supporting SGIP. And as George said, this commitment is in several forms. One is funding. adding to the funding that we're receiving from the member dues, but also, as George said, in terms of the subject matter experts at NIST, continuing their leadership and their contributions to all the activities of SGIP. So I think, one thing that we have to emphasize with SGIP is that we bring together stakeholders. We have 22 different stakeholder categories that were defined in 2009 to make sure that the work that we do is, that we effectively cover all the different perspectives, all the different types of stakeholders involved with smart grid, and bring them together to achieve consensus, have an open process, and support NIST, of course, to fulfill the EISA responsibilities. So to just reinforce this commitment, we last year worked on a MOU, or a Memo of Understanding, between NIST and between SGIP. And then in December 2012, where we had our face-to-face SGIP meetings in Irving, Texas, Pat Gallagher, the director of NIST, and myself signed the Memo of Understanding to really continue the collaborative relationship between the two organizations. In addition to that, SGIP submitted a proposal for a federal funding opportunity that was issued by NIST the last half of last year. Through a competitive process at NIST, the SGIP 2.0 was selected, and a cooperative agreement was executed in April of 2013. So this, continues the reinforcement of the relationship and the commitment by NIST for SGIP, and to learn more of the details of this cooperative agreement. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Dave Woolman, who will give us more details and more understanding here of this cooperative agreement that was just executed. Dave?
Thank you, John. I'm going to build on John's comments by going into a little bit more detail on the cooperative agreement. This cooperative agreement with SGIP is a major step forward for the NIST Smart Grid program and SGIP, and it supports a collaborative relationship in key technical activities to advance smart grid interoperability in partnership with the smart grid community. So we're absolutely delighted to be able to work together in this way. The federal funding opportunity that John mentioned is listed here, and the cooperative agreement, the proposal submitted by the SGIP was for the operation of an international panel to promote the acceleration and adoption of smart grid interoperability standards. We've hosted Patrick Gannon as well as Susan Hoyler here at NIST this week to help work out some of the details of the cooperative agreement. The funding that is being provided by NIST through this cooperative agreement is $750,000 through the end of this calendar year, and then $1 million in the subsequent years as we make continued progress. The purpose of this cooperative agreement has been described is that the SGIP will be able to support NIST in fulfilling our role under EISA, and the funding provides the ability to have some key technical expertise within the SGIP organization. It furthers this collaborative relationship to accelerate standards, and it provides for a variety of technical activities to support smart grid interoperability. As George and John have both mentioned, NIST is going to continue to participate within the SGIP and help to provide technical leadership. And through this, we're going to, as outlined in the Memorandum of Understanding, this will include committee positions, priority action plan chairs, DUG leagues, as appropriate and consistent with NIST Smart Grid programmatic goals. So some of the things that are going to be funded within the SGIP include NIST priorities with respect to EISA, including, for example, review of standards, and particularly cybersecurity, resolution of advanced architectures issues, the functions of some of the other committees, including development of the testing and certification programs, and technical expertise within the priority action plans. And one thing to note is that this whole effort continues to validate this very productive public-private partnership to accelerate smart grid standards. One of the key deliverables that NIST has through its EISA responsibilities is in the NIST framework. And if we move to the next slide, I'd like to say a few comments about that. NIST has published the NIST framework and roadmap for smart grid interoperability standards, and we're currently at release 2.0. And over time, we've used the SGIP as a valued source of technical input and expertise to help NIST as we further smart grid through the framework. And through this cooperative agreement, this relationship will continue and even accelerate. We're in the process of doing an upgrade cycle for this framework document to create a release 3.0. And as such, later this fiscal year, we'll have the starts of a draft of revisions and go through a more public review comment with the goal of producing another release 3.0 document in the early next calendar year. But for example, included within the framework is the conceptual model that many around the world have used as the organizational basis to wrap their arms around smart grid. These kind of architectural thoughts and discussions are some of the key parts that then feed into the NIST framework, and the work within the SGIP is exceptionally valuable for NIST as input to all this. So that gives some of the items that we'll talk about, and we will also answer your questions in the Q&A. And so I'm going to turn things over to Patrick Gannon now, who will say a little bit more about the SGIP with the Cooperative Agreement program. Patrick? I'm not hearing Patrick right now. Let me check to see if...
Thank you, David.
Are you on back, Patrick?
Should be on now. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick.
Okay, and thank you, David, for your leadership on the working with the NIST staff. And also I want to be sure to thank George Arnold for his continuing leadership on our board of directors. And John, certainly as chairman of our board, has also been our worldwide spokesman for SGIP. And so all of those leadership and efforts together has brought us to where we are today. And one of the key things I wanted to emphasize is that we are able to now deliver on our goal, and also NIST goal, which was to create a not-for-profit member-driven organization that is primarily funded by the private sector, which it is. And so we've been able to, since the beginning of the year, grow the organization to now over 170 members, and representing all the different sectors through our stakeholder category method of operations, and attracting members from around the world. And we have many more that have come back and indicated interest to us through John McDonald's efforts. We had established letters of interest from agreement with these with at least 5 other countries, and many of those are now taking an active role with the new organization here. But what the NIST cooperative agreement does is it really allows us to continue the acceleration, and some of the ways we're accelerating is with the hiring of additional staff. I was able to bring on Susan Hoyler as our Director of Technical Operations, and as David mentioned, she and I were on site with the NIST staff, and she's done a great deal of work following up directly with the NIST staff, and she will be a key focal point in interacting in a kind of project management role with the NIST group as we identify priorities and efforts for how we want to move forward with the operation. And so one of the ways that we will be able to do this is through the, I'll get to my next slide, sorry. It is through really providing the process and framework here. And for those of you who may not have been familiar with it, and we're using much of the framework process that was tested out in the for the last 3 years, and updating that by getting even more members directly involved in that. And one of the key things I want to emphasize is that this process, which has been developed called the Priority Action Plan Lifecycle Process, really begins with the identification of a need. And we have that process through our outreach efforts with both other standards organizations, but also with other industry groups and federal agencies, not only in the U.S. but other countries, is where we identify the need, then we have a work-through process where that can be reviewed and determine what are the best set of resources to go forward, and then a more detailed priority action plan is put together for that, identifying what resources, what the goals, what the mission would be, and how to implement that. And in that process, identifying what the specific standards requirements are. And once we have all that available, then we really see our role is coordinating with standards development organizations, either in identifying standards that exist or where they do not currently exist, encouraging through those other standards development organizations efforts that they can launch within their particular activity structure. So we try very hard not to overlap in terms of the actual standard development work. And then once the SDO has completed its effort, there is a process of submission of that standard back into the SGIP process here, where it goes through review. And that review is done both by our cybersecurity committee, and it's a significant number of subcommittees they have. So we have a great deal of activity looking at how these interoperable standards, as they become part of the electrical grid infrastructure, really do meet the cybersecurity tests that are absolutely necessary. And reviewing these with our architecture committee to ensure that they fit within an architectural structure, and also an evaluation by people, experts in testing and certification. And then one of the last steps is to ensure that the standards themselves can be implemented, and ensuring that there's a marketplace for that, vendors to implement solutions, and a ready market to begin deploying those. Once we have all that vetting process completed, then we go through a final review by the SGIP Board of Directors and the membership to vote to accept or not. And once they are accepted through that process, then only then are they allowed to be included in our catalog of standards. And so far to date, we have had over 50 items, 56 to be specific, that have gone through this vetting process and are now included in the catalog of standards. And today we have other new work that's beginning this process. We have received recently proposals to establish new priority action plan groups, and those are going through this life cycle process. And so as they get fully established, we will announce those new pieces of work, priority action plans, as they're ready to be launched. And so this is how the cooperative agreement funding is not only going to allow us to continue this, but to fully staff positions and move these things forward in a time frame that really allows us to meet not only market demands, but the needs of the community as it's been envisioned, and to meet the requirements that NIST has laid out in terms of its priorities to meet the Energy Independence and Security Act that they have to fulfill. And so this is how we will be working in a cooperative fashion to engage the industry partners and making sure that we can address industry needs as well as priorities established through NIST. And with that, that's a summation of the work that we announced that we have here and the information. And so I would like to encourage John, if you will, take the screen panel back and display the flat screen. And then if you can handle the vetting of the questions that have come in. Okay, John, do you have it there?
I do, thank you. Okay, a couple of questions here. The first one is, please let us know if there is anything new regarding NERC version 5 for SCADA and PLC.
John, is that an area you're familiar with it? John McDonald?
No, no, okay. I think that's something we'll have to get back to the questioner on.
Okay. Next question. With this funding, is there a plan to bring subject matter experts from private industry to review standard documents who are not SGIP members?
We are right now going through a prioritization process to evaluate what those needs are. One of the encouragements we had is to be sure that there is more private sector involvement, and whether that is through a paid technical champion process or a mix with volunteers, that is what's being evaluated right now. And we are looking at that, and we'll look at the needs basically driven from the groups that are active, and as we look at the people involved in those groups and determine what are the resources they might need. And so we will have a process whereby the particular working groups can make those needs known, and we can evaluate the best set of resources to do that, and whether that can be fulfilled with volunteers available to us, or whether we will need to go out for, as the questioner was asking, what was called technical champion.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Will the SGIP 1.0 assets such as the catalog of standards be migrated to the SGIP 2.0 pages at the new website?
It's a combination approach. Right now we have set up the groups, so we have migrated over all of the group names and group structures that were there, and the participants. Those participants from the 1.0 activities whose employer have joined SGIP were automatically loaded into the new working groups, group structures, committees within the current workspace. What we are doing is providing links from those new groups back to locations on the TWICI site that was where most of the information was maintained, and going through a process to essentially update the descriptions of the group. In some cases, the group scope of work and so forth has remained the same. In other cases, there might be some updates needed to that. And so we're going through that process, and also looking at what documents are needed for the current activities. All of the documents and email list will be archived and maintained through the NIST-supported TWICI, and on a selective basis, we'll be moving over any documents that are needed to support the current working activities of the groups under the new collaborative workspace.
Thank you, Patrick. Next question. Can you specifically discuss how to interact with standards-making organizations? Should they be establishing the framework rather than being specified by SGIP?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the last part of that?
Yes.
Should be. Understand the question part.
Should the SDO be establishing the framework rather than being specified by SGIP?
I think that will be done in a collaborative fashion. Obviously, we know from the work going on within SGIP, especially through the architecture group, what's going to be needed to fit within a framework and also to be interoperable. And so there will be, I think, in terms of the requirements phase, some indication of how these requirements can be filled within the framework, but we would obviously work closely with the SDO to be sure that it fits, that they're able to do the specification in a way that would enable it when it comes back to be submitted into the catalog of standards, that it would meet the various criteria laid out through our architecture and other evaluation groups.
Patrick, this is Dave Ullman. I'd like to add something to that.
Please do.
There are multiple standards developing organizations, and so having a framework coordination process able to work with all of these standards development organizations and help to provide that coordination and vision and architectural frameworks and reference models is a very valuable part of our effort. So I think we want to both maintain the good relationships with the SDOs, but also keep progress going on the overall framework.
Thank you. Next question. Does SGIP work with the ZIGBee Alliance?
Yes, the ZIGBee Alliance is a member of SGIP.
Hey, Patrick, this is John. Let me add also, I think, Robbie Simpson is very involved with the ZIGBee Alliance and has chaired the SCP 2.0 work, and Robbie has been on the board also of SGIP for several years. So not only Robbie, but I'm sure others, but we have not only membership on the board with ZIGBee, but active cross-participation, of key folks in both organizations on a continual basis.
Okay, our next question here. The outputs from the work groups need to be available on publicly accessible pages outside the copy workspaces. Will the catalog of standards and other artifacts needed by product and system designers be publicly available?
Yes, they will be. In fact, one of the major things we did in selecting the workspace platform is that it enables us to identify groups of documents or folders so that we can once work gets to a certain stage, that it can be made available for public viewing. And so that's clearly a part of that process, and we will be setting up those mechanisms and providing a place for the public to be able to see what's been announced and where they can go to review and see the results of that work.
Very good. What will the impact of the President's recent cybersecurity executive order have on this new SGIP NIST cooperative agreement?
So I can
David,
take that one. Let me take that one,
Okay,
Patrick. Yeah. So the work on the cybersecurity, executive order that NIST has been tasked to do is really benefiting from some of the methodology that's been used in this process, as well as a lot of the artifacts, the standards, best practices, and so forth. Obviously, the cybersecurity effort covers all types of critical infrastructure. The electric grid is one of them. And at this point, the process is going through a very similar process to the smart grid process through a series of public workshops, asking for the community to identify existing frameworks used in specific sectors, existing best practices, and so forth. So all of the work that's been done through the SGIP process and the Smart Grid Cybersecurity Committee is providing a key foundation for that broader effort.
Okay, next question. This grant is for the operation of an international panel. What will SGIP be doing to make it more internationally oriented?
Well, one of the key things is to continue the outreach effort that we have been doing, and through that effort we have been in discussions with both organizations as well as government agencies in other countries who have indicated their interest in both signing up MOUs that may be necessary for them to have participation, as well as through membership processes for that. And we have a number of those that have been identified and are in the works. So we will continue that effort. And I know that John McDonald is active in areas. John, you were at some recent international meetings. Do you want to add anything else to that?
Yeah, we've just last month there was an international smart grid plenary in Brussels. It was co-sponsored by EISA for smart grids, the European group that's focused on the distribution part of the system, and Global Smart Grid Federation, which is the international group of the GridWise Alliance. And so that was had 4 sessions in Brussels, and you know, we moderated one of those sessions, and so it was a good opportunity to talk about the work of the SGIP in this not just European but really international group. So we, not only myself, but you know, other board members and other the leadership of SGIP, as we travel internationally and give talks and do the work that we do, we take every opportunity, you know, to talk about SGIP and make sure that you know, the standards groups and the smart grid leadership in other countries are aware of what we're doing, and to hopefully we can work together, you know, and as I mentioned, with a number of the countries, they see us as a part of their team in providing the standards information and with their overall strategy for the country for smart grid. And let me just add one other thing. Our international task force with SGIP, you know, it's one thing to sign agreements with the countries, but that's just the start. You know, we have our letters of intent or memos of understanding we have with these different countries. We have prioritized topics of things that we want to work on together, and this takes you know, it takes participating members of the SGIP to help manage the work efforts to make sure we're showing progress. We have continual collaboration between, you know, SGIP and the country, and then reporting back to the SGIP of the work that we've done. And again, I want to ask, you know, all of those of you that are participating here, we really could use a lot more help from participating members on helping us with the International Task Force and managing not only the agreements that we have in place now, but we'll be getting a number of new agreements here in the near future. So it's a need that we have, and we welcome any participation, and to just let Patrick know, let's say, and we'll get you plugged in right away with the international efforts or ongoing efforts that we have.
Okay. We have a question from a gentleman named Mark Andre. It's a little difficult for me to understand, but let me try to ask it here. And Mark, if you can continue to try to refine it, I'd appreciate it. Can the framework support NERC compliances activities for cybersecurity protection. Can we use your framework to comply to CIP 02-09? This gentleman is involved in NERC activities, which is why he's interested.
This is Dave Woolman. With respect to compliance, that falls under the NERC's auspices. Within the framework and the work of the Cybersecurity Committee, we've provided guidelines for smart grid cybersecurity, and the group has also done mappings between the NIST IR 7628 and the NERC SIP 5s, so that we have an understanding of the relationship between the guidance provided by NIST and its framework, and also working within the SGIP. But that's different than the compliance rules and NERC standards, so they're separate in that regard.
Okay, that was all of the questions. Oh, Mark. I'm sorry, hold on one second. Okay. Regarding the answer on SGIP's international needs that was mentioned, what type of resources is SGIP looking for specifically? In that same context, will SGIP be contributing through its members to ITU or WRC processes?
Could you repeat that, John?
Yes. Regarding SGIP's international TF, I'm not sure what Dan means by TF, need that was mentioned, what type of resources is SGIP looking for specifically? In that same context, will SGIP be contributing through its members to ITU or WRC processes? And Mr. Lubar is when he says international TF, he means the International Task Force. What type of resources is SGIP looking for specifically?
Well, I think we're really looking for members who obviously who have an interest in ideally an interest probably through the work that they're doing at their own companies in what's happening outside the U.S. And probably as part of their jobs they do international travel. So what we're looking for is basically we have a number of agreements in place. As I mentioned, we're going to have a number of new agreements, and the resources we're looking for is to be able to have a participating member and say, for instance, could you take the lead and manage the agreement that we have with Korea or with Ecuador or Japan? And so we have an agreement. We have a priority list of what is it, maybe top 2 or 3 items that we wanted to tackle first in terms of working together, and take the responsibility. So the resource that would take the responsibility for SGIP, so I will lead the effort to work with this country and to make sure that we execute on the agreement that we work together on, we prioritize what needs to be done, and now we want to execute the agreement. An example of this would be the first agreement we signed was with Korea, and one of the top priority items we wanted to do with Korea was to collaborate together on a joint workshop on smart grid standards. And through a lot of planning that took place, we successfully held a joint workshop on it was the Friday at the end of the week of the December face-to-face meeting that we had in Irving, Texas. And there had to be probably maybe 20, 25 experts from Korea that came to the United States, and we had a number of sessions during the day and had a workshop on different areas of smart grid. And we learned about what Korea is doing. They learned about what we're doing. And it was a phenomenal exchange of some very valuable information that day that we wouldn't otherwise have been able to learn on both sides. So that was just an example of executing on one of the tasks, one of the top priority tasks that we had between Korea and the SGIP. We have a number of these in agreements with the different countries, and so if you'd like to help us on the International Task Force and work with one of these countries with the agreement that we have, we would love to have your help to do that. So that's really what we're looking for, is that type of resource.
Okay. Are there any other questions? We've gone through all of them here on the list. And if anybody's on the phone and has a question, if you could raise your hand, I could bring you into the conversation. Okay, Patrick, it appears there aren't any other questions.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, John, for handling that part of the Q&A for us. And again, thank you to all of those who have taken your time to join in there and be a part of this town hall meeting for the SGIP and working with this going forward. We'll have other sessions in the future, and we look forward to you to stay tuned for the next e-meeting that we're going to have on July 13th. And also on the website, we currently have information up there about our annual meeting, the first week of November. It's currently targeted the 5th to the 7th of November in Florida. And so we'll have more details coming soon. So be sure to check that there, and be sure you're on the list to receive our newsletters and news functions there. And for any of you who have not yet joined SGIP as a member, we have a lot more going on that I think you could find very exciting, and so you can go to the sgip.org website, and you'll see information there about the membership agreement and the process there, and we have staff standing by to help with that process. So again, thank you for your participation, and thank you very much to the leaders here from NIST and your vote of confidence in this organization. Everyone have a good day.